Okay, we're just waiting for a little swap up here and then we're all go again. Right, we'll reconvene the meeting and we are straight into the next amendment, which has been put up by Councillor Simpson and Councillor Cooper, which Councillor Simpson will speak to introduce it, and obviously it relates to E and F, but whether that's the only thing it relates to, we will have clarified.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my amendment is not by replacement, but it's actually an extra amendment. We talk about in the Mayor's recommendation that we collectively are happy to have a targeted rate to raise X dollars to fund both the Water Quality Improvement Program and the Natural Environment targeted rate. The purpose of my amendment today, or added resolution really, is to give people the choice of how that should be funded. So currently the recommendations only use a targeted rate, but we are removing the interim transport levies. So this, the same amount of money would be raised, but giving people the option that it could be via a potential fixed levy, which equals the transport levy, which we are going to remove. So in other words, you get a 2.5 rates rise. The ITL stays the same, except it's no longer the ITL. It is the same amount of money potentially that is used to fund both the natural environment and the extra funding for the natural environment and the extra funding for water quality. So it just gives people a choice. I'm not going to go any further, Mr. Chairman. It's just an option how to fund. Not giving a preference one way or the other, it's just an option to fund. And yes, in doing so, I think that would show in the associated documentation what that means for the ratepayers in every ward. Yes. It could then make the
right,
choice.
So just so we're quite clear, in effect, there's two aspects to this. One is the fact, do we do it on capital value or do we do it effectively as a flat rate? That is really the nub of where this is coming from.
It's a choice that people can make.
And the amount that it's saying to raise, which is the same as the interim transport levy, is the same as what would be achieved through the Mayor's proposal of E plus F2. What is F2 up on the screen on the amended proposal? So let's be quite clear, it's equal, they're equal.
It's using the higher figure.
So,
using the higher figure, F2.
Yeah, it's using the higher figure, but so effectively they're exactly the same when it comes to raising the money. It's the mechanism underlying it that I think Councillor Simpson and Councillor Cooper are getting to, which is basically the Mayoral proposal was saying, well, let's move to capital value, but let's not make it quite so onerous by settling on a long-term differential target of 32.7, but we're going to go 25.8. To be used, and then basically this amendment is saying we're going to do it exactly the same as the interim transport levy, which is, I could say a poll tax, but that would be
actually.
So
point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order, please.
Just trying to clarify for you.
No, actually, Mr. Chairman, I think. I'm sorry, but you're actually putting your own spin on it, and that's actually not explaining it. And I think that it's up to the mover to explain it, and you not to interpret it. I think that's a little bit.
Councillor Simpson, do you want to explain it?
Quite frankly, that's a bit offensive, Mr. Chairman. It's exactly what we have now. We have what we have. I'm giving people a choice. What we have now is a rates rise and an ITL of a set fee. This is basically saying the same thing would apply. Rates rise 2.5 and a set fee, and it's giving people the option. They have the option of doing either the targeted rate, as per the Mayor's recommendation, or a set fee. The way the Mayor has put it, with the greatest of respect, is just giving people one option. Their only option in the Mayor's current proposal is for them to go for a targeted rate or not to do it.
Now, there is some paperwork coming, yes? Everyone's got it. Additional rating impact scenarios for the natural, okay, so it's in the paperwork in there. So, Councillor Newman, you're next.
Not a question, a comment. Chair, it was unwise of you to say what you did. I won't be supporting this amendment because I certainly don't want to introduce what is in effect a flat tax levy. It is hard enough to support these target rates at capital value. It is impossible for me to support them at a fixed levy amount, given I think the impact would be disproportionate on certain communities that are already at the wrong end of some of the changes that are coming with respect to the impact of this budget, taking into account revaluation. So, yeah, look, I won't be supporting that, Councillor Simpson, but I think that it's a reasonable question to ask. But if you were going to do that, really, to be honest, we should be putting a couple of other things back on the table, like the interim transport levy, and considering that at a capital value as well. Not for me.
And it was remiss of me as chair, because I was actually looking at some paperwork to consider it was a question, but I'm taking that as
that's my comment.
Yeah, yep. As a comment, but questions of this first, of which is obviously of the officers or of the mover or seconder. Councillor Walker.
Sure. In respect of, I guess, the matching principle, that is how you arrive at how you're applying something. We've got a choice here around capital value as compared to fixed. Can you comment on the relative merits around that principle?
Applying the charge on capital value would distribute slightly more of the cost to higher value properties and slightly less to lower value properties. As Councillor Newman noted, on average the lower value properties are having slightly higher percentage increases as a consequence of the introduction of as the consequence of the revaluation. Conversely, if it's applied as a fixed charge, it flattens it across everybody, so everyone pays the same amount, which means on a percentage basis a slightly higher incidence on lower value properties as compared to higher value properties. The relative margins are small because the rate is small, around on average $114 a week in combinations, a year, sorry, a couple of dollars a week. Those comparisons you can see in this document, additional rating impacts.
What page is that?
So that's the separate document that was handed out this morning, along with the natural environment targeted rate papers. So got the heading additional rating impact scenarios. And there's one set, the first few pages show the impacts by local board area and percentage and dollar value terms on the total rates for applying these rates on capital value, and that includes all of the changes, revaluation, 2.5%, etc. And then there's a second scenario where it's applied as a fixed charge per separately used or inhabited part of a rating unit. So you can see the slight difference across the local board areas of the application of the rate under the two different options.
Okay. Councillor Kirby, you don't have a question, do you?
Are you questioning, or are we commenting?
Oh, still questioning.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to it, that's fine.
Councillor Casey.
I would just ask the Mayor why he would not support a poll tax.
Perhaps I should answer that in my comments, but it is about equity. It is about rates being progressive in the same way that our income tax is progressive, and obviously it's a hell of a lot bigger ask on our low-income folk than folk that are reasonably comfortably off. And I just say, and I'll repeat it again later, but it is worth noting that it's our lowest income suburbs that had the greatest rise in property value. But I notice on the latest real estate figures, even since July of this year, they are also the areas that have had a disproportionate fall in value, while the higher income suburbs have gone up. So it is about fairness to people and affordability, and trying to take some of the pressure off our retired folk, our low-income folk, people on minimum wage, for whom this could be a struggle.
Can I respond to that, Mr Chairman? No. Because not just because you have a high capital value home doesn't mean you have high income.
Oh, sorry, I'll reserve my comment.
Reserve the comment. So, Councillor Filipaina.
Chair, just a question on clarification, and it's got in there in the middle sentence. It's targeted rate set on capital value and a fixed levy approximately equal. So you're saying it's and or a fixed levy. Is that the choice?
So consulted on as both, either.
So it's an or, not an and?
No.
Or.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying, because you've got and up there.
Sorry. Or.
That's all right.
Thank you.
It should actually have as, not both, as a targeted rate or a fixed levy.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it shouldn't have both.
No, so that's my clarification. So at least that can be changed. Secondly, just to our officers, can you tell me if which is the community, say low socioeconomic area, which capital value or fixed levy will they end up paying more?
The areas with the lower incomes tend to have, as a whole,
Yes.
would tend to have lower property values on average,
Yes.
and they would have a slightly higher percentage in dollar increase if it was applied as a fixed levy.
That's right. Thank you.
Not huge in absolute terms, but
No, that's a guide. Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, so I'll just speak to this now. if
No,
it's
no,
appropriate.
questions?
Okay,
Good questions.
right, later then.
Yep, any more questions? I have a question. So, I'm looking at some figures that was provided to me last week. So, if we went to a fixed levy, similar to exactly the scenario with the interim transport levy, what does that mean for our biggest ratepayer, business ratepayer, which is Sky City? And what does that mean to our lowest business ratepayer? What would be, what are the two scenarios? What would it be under fixed charge? What would Sky City pay compared to the dairy? And if it was under the CV, what would Sky City pay compared to the dairy?
I seem to recall having this discussion 3 years ago.
Do you want me to pass you the sheet, Andrew?
Oh,
Do you know the answer to this
I've got
question,
lots of bits of
Councillor?
paper here. I'm just
Maybe
seeing
ask
which piece I have.
No,
What
you
I can
answer
say
already.
is if it's a fixed charge, Sky City would pay the same as the dairy. If it was capital value, they'd pay a lot more. A lot more. I would note, just to reiterate a point someone made earlier, that the proposal for both of these rates is that we would raise 25.8% of the rates requirement, or the revenue requirement, from the business sector, which is up from the 14.6% collected under the interim transport levy, and ultimately the target of the long-term differential strategy. But Sky City would definitely pay a lot more than the dairy under a fixed charge. I mean, under a capital value charge, a lot less, exactly the same under a fixed charge.
So it would be fair enough to say, the question being, this would penalise 52% of the businesses.
Councillor, Mr Chairman,
I'm allowed to
That's a
ask
question.
questions, just like anyone else.
It's a question. That's a good question too.
When we analysed the interim transport levy and applying it on a capital value basis sometime last year, rather than on a fixed charge, just over half of the businesses were better off if we moved to capital value.
Any Any other questions? So we have councillor Cooper.
Thank you. The reason I support this, I'm really shocked. We're using questions to actually debate this, which is kind of disingenuous. And for me, what really, really worries me is that we've got a group of people that don't want to give people a choice. They don't want to consult. They've decided for these people what they should think. And that really concerns me, because I thought we were committed to consulting. But here we're going, no, you'll only get one. You can choose this or not. You can't choose any other way of doing this. And to me, that's what should be being debated around the table here, not the merits of the proposal. It's about putting it into the consultation document. So I actually find that kind of, approach to it, disingenuous, as I say. This is about giving people a choice. It's also pretty... We trot the same old thing out about Sky City, but we're not talking about Sky City. We're talking now about people who have found themselves now in properties with high values and have a fixed income. And they're not going to get any more opportunity to make any more money, and that's a huge percentage of our population. If you look at people over 65 now, that is a growing, much bigger and bigger population. And we're basically saying to them, no, you don't get to choose. You're not even going to have a say on this. And that is what I think is important here. Look, people may reject it outright, and that's fine with me. Absolutely. This is just giving people a choice. And I think that anyone that votes against this is actually supporting not giving people a chance to have a say. That's what this is about. I don't like the fact that some people want to decide for people before we even get there. What choices they can have. So that's why I support this. It's about choice, it's about public consultation, which is often talked about and yelled about around here, that we must give people that option. So that's why I support this. Thank you.
Councillor Philippine, have I got you correctly down to make a comment or not?
No, I'll take my tablets.
May not have moved you.
I'll take my tablets
Councillor
if
Walker.
Sure.
Wayne Walker.
And we're speaking to this now, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Okay. So if we've got a choice in instrument, I'd suggest that the fixed levy is a relatively blunt instrument. I mean, equally, capital value is blunt, but not as blunt. If I ask myself what is the closer approximation, I would suggest that a larger value of capital corresponds more with impact on the environment.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Could you please rule on something?
Yep.
I thought we were discussing whether these two options were going in, not the merits of each one. So could you please rule on what the discussion should be, whether they should be in the consultation or what the merits of each...
It's an interjection with this one.
Well,
could you please rule? I'm just asking you to rule, thank you.
I'm overruling you. Yeah.
You're overruling her.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I'm saying it's fine. I mean, he's building a case. If he goes on too long and repetitive, then it'll be...
I'm trying not to, Mr.
a
Chair.
relative point of
Excellent.
order. But
No, he's
Wayne
always
is getting
repetitive.
better and better. And so, keep going, Councillor Walker.
So when I evaluate the options, I would suggest capital value is a better approximation, a better match for allocating the cost. The rationale is that higher valued properties, for example, in the central area of Auckland, correspond with where a substantial amount of money is going to be spent around the central interceptor, around areas that are going to benefit from a reduction of the massive amount of sewage that is flowing into our harbours. Equally, I would suggest that in rural areas, larger farms that are clearly going to have more capital value will also benefit from those things like possum control and water quality and the like that reflect that larger capital value. So as much and all as both instruments are blunt, capital value is the better of the two.
That's not what what this amendment is about.
It's another interjection. That's
Yep,
6.
thank you. We actually don't have anyone else who wishes to speak on this matter.
Question.
Let's vote.
Oh, Councillor Cashmore.
Just a very quick question. Having only received this information this morning, although I did speak to you last week about it, Andrew, what of the two systems advocated up there has the least effect on the rating base this time as compared to last time, what people pay? So I've looked at the individual figures for lots of the world. We haven't done an amalgam.
That would depend on how one interpreted what the effect was. It doesn't affect the rating base.
The numbers,
Get the same
what they
amount.
pay,
When they
haven't
pay,
changed.
I'll have to have a look in the charts. It's probably
The reason I ask, Mr Chair, is there are some perverse alterations there, and Councillor Newman is actually quite correct. By having a system based on a flat rate, his people are disadvantaged, and they've had also faced the second highest valuation increase.
Well, they can
the
say
city.
they don't want it if they get consulted on it, can't they?
And I think, Mr Chair, what we need to have here is a scenario that has the least changes as compared to last time, to keep it as simple as possible.
Can we vote now, Mr Chair?
Well, we just know Andrew's just
we
trying
haven't
to pose.
we haven't summed the changes in the charts.
The answer to his own questions.
I think we know where Councillor Cashmore's coming from. Yes?
It's probably the case that the capital value has us, just a quick glance, capital value might be slightly less in terms of change, but
That's what I got to as well.
I haven't summed the charts.
Right. Well, we have no one else.
By division.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mayor Goff.
I've said substantially what I was going to say, but just about the question of choice. This, a couple of our councillors have said this isn't about taking a stance, it's about giving people a choice. I think sometimes you've got to take a value stance when you're putting options up, and my value is very much to try to protect those who might be literally harmed by a rating increase that is disproportionate to their income. So why aren't we putting it up as a choice? Because I think it will have harmful and negative effects, and therefore I'm against saying that that is an option that we would encourage people to think about. Having said that, everybody that wants to make submissions will have the opportunity to comment on the fact that it's based on a flexible basis on capital value, and I'm sure those that think that a poll tax type arrangement will not hesitate to make that point in their submissions to us. I take the point that Councillor Simpson raised that high value doesn't always mean high income, but I think Councillor Walker addressed that in saying it's the most proximate tool that we've got, that if you live in a really valuable house, then you're more likely to have more wealth and higher income. And if you're living in a low-income area, in a low-valued house, you're generally there because you are on low income. So I think that it is a proximate tool. I think that we need to look after our people who are retired. They may be in that category of high-value property, low income, but we have mechanisms available through the council where we can take that into account for this reason, but most particularly for reasons that revaluation might push somebody into a category where they can't cope. It's not about trying to evict people because they can't keep their rates. We would enter into an arrangement to protect people's best interests, and it may come out of the estate. Now, the kids might not like that, but my job is not to protect the kids and their inheritance. It is to make sure that Auckland residents can afford the rates that are imposed on them. So I think, you know, I really do mean it seriously, that the properties that were last to go up in value are the first to have come down in value, and we've seen that in the latest real estate figures. And I'm worried that we'll be saddling low-income areas with a valuation at their peak, but already they've fallen off from that peak, whereas higher income areas have continued to go up. So this is about fairness, it is about equity, it is about making a value judgment and saying we believe that is the right choice. But by all means, if you want to comment on it and think that there's a different view you want to promote, there is nothing that stops people doing that in their submissions to us. So for that reason, with respect, I oppose the amendment.
I'll just make...
By division.
Yeah, we'll do that. I'll just make a brief comment because I just want to be quite clear that the Mayor has moved in his proposal that we use the 25.8 differential goal as our start point for these targeted rates. That is different than 32.7. It's actually a third. It's effectively he's going 2/3 of the way, but he's not going that whole 3/3, if you know what I mean. So effectively, it is a compromise in the middle there in the Mayor, and I think it's a sensible one to be going to 25.8, but that does actually cushion the blow, if it's a severe blow, to those that are going to have to pay on capital value. So by division, we have...
Penny.
Councillor Clow,
No.
Councillor Casey,
Oh,
Deputy Mayor Cashmore,
Against.
Councillor Collins,
Against.
Councillor Cooper,
Or
Councillor Darby,
Against. Against.
Councillor Filipaina,
Against.
Councillor Fletcher,
or
Mayor Goff,
Against?
Councillor Hills,
No, thank you. Sorry.
Member Honeck,
Against.
Councillor Hulse,
no.
Councillor Lee,
No.
Councillor Newman,
Against.
Councillor Quacks,
For.
Councillor Sayers,
Or.
Councillor Simpson,
Or
Councillor Stewart,
or
Member Taipari,
Against.
Councillor Sir John Walker,
No.
Councillor Wayne Walker,
No.
Councillor Watson.
Against.
Right, that's carried 16-6.
Fails. Fails.
Lost.
Pretty close.
Lost.
thanks, Ross.
Well, it's closer
Take
than last time.
I was
You'll go
reading
with
a
the
little
first count.
figure up there.
Good at
Right,
taking the numbers.
we're now moving on to the next amendment, which is the first of two amendments put up by Councillor Filipaina. And this one is seconded by Councillor Hulse, and it relates specifically to F. And the way it is worded, it is proposing that we would go out with a third option, which is the original option. So, okay, so it's not a replacement
Gonna be tough
for
on
the
low
replacement.
It's an option.
It's going out with,
I
therefore,
thought
with
we
three
didn't like
options.
Up on the
What
low-income
has been
people.
proposed here is we would go out with F1 of an additional 1 to
Selective options.
23 million,
Options
2 would
nine.
be an additional 279, and 3 would be an additional 356. So let's be quite clear. And we've got a second.
I think they wanted every targeted rate.
I will second it.
Yep. No, we've got you behind it, Councillor Hulse.
So, just, I don't know if you're going to go questions first or we just go straight into debate, because
Well,
at the moment the
what I'm
betting
dealing
order
with-
is
I'm
2
allowed-
up, 2-0.
Well, I suppose
the
I'm just
moment.
allowing the movers
So I
to...
don't like my chances, but hey, I'll give it a crack.
movers to have a say to explain their thinking, which
Cool
might
bananas.
lead to more questions. I'm just trying to be helpful here. So you don't have to say anything as the mover
Oh,
at
look,
this stage?
I will, and then at least,
Choice.
we'll just see how it goes. Look, the reason I put this up because when I saw the red one that was put up there through you, Chair, I was a wee bit confused because with this document that we've all had, which gave us the options, the one that was up there previously and number 2 ended up having the slow declined one, as in, let's have a look at it and we'll just slowly, the decline will be just slow and slow, when in fact we actually, and it's been through the workshops and everything else, that in fact what we needed to do was option B. And I mean, we've been talking about, leaving things for our kids, but also we're also been talking about the state of the water and around what we need to do to protect and enhance Auckland's natural environment. So for me, when I look at the 3 options that were given, and again, I just want to quote what Councillor Fletcher said when she spoke earlier, which is, this is our budget. And, you know, it was the Mayor's proposal, but this is our budget. And so what I'm sort of saying is that, look, we need to put that out to the community. We also need to say to them that the lower option that was up there originally, it's not consistent with the regional pest management plan that came through the committee and which we've recommended for consultation at the same time. It is not consistent with it. And so for me, you know, when I look at under the middle option with the sheet, as I mentioned earlier, you know, what I like about it, and I know it's going to be an increase, but what I like about it is that percentage of rural manland protected from possums, 100%. When we have a look at marine biosecurity management, we are being proactive and not reactive in regards to this particular one. When I then have a look at freshwater pest management, we have none in option A that was previously, none in option B that is worship put up, but we have 2 highest priority lakes protected. Because it is about our future, it's about the future of our children. When I have a look at risk of coyote dieback disease spreading, 10 to 20% compared to the others. That's over 80%, and then you've got 30 to 50% under the option that was up there. So, you know, for me, it is leaving something, but it's an option, and Councillor Cooper mentioned that, and it is an option that goes out there. Now, if it comes back, as Councillor Cooper said in regards to the previous amendment, if it comes back and it says, nah, we don't want it, okay, said we'll move on. No issues with that, but it is an option. So that's all I'm really saying. So if I've sort of generated any questions, sweet, not to me, but...
I'm just going to ask Gail to just... So I want people to look at the original agenda, page 17, and what the wording on F2 is. That is the original wording. So F1 is the exact wording as up on the screen, but F2 says for an enhanced protection and restoration program.
And then you have a look at...
New amendment says for an expanded ecosystems and species protection, including dieback protection. So that's one thing. I just want an explanation of the change of wording. And then in F2, the wording was changed again, and it says for coyote dieback and target ecological protection. So the original F2, could you explain that wording, and then what does the subtle changes in these F3 and F2 do to your original program?
Through the chair, specific wording could potentially be adding a complication. The difference between the two options is about the specific outcomes that are being that will result from the investment. So I think that the key thing here is that the original expanded program, which is the highest spend, differs from the program that's in front of you today, which was the one that we discussed at the workshop last week, in a few key ways. And what we've done to help with the discussion is, if everybody could look at the pile of papers in front of them, there's a folded table that looks like this, and that's intended to show you for each of the 10 outcome areas that fall under the natural environment proposal, here is where the now currently 4 options sit. So you've got your current state, which is your 9.7 million per annum. You've got that smaller investment option, which has always been on the table, which is the current plus the 12.9 per annum. You've got the new option, which was introduced at the workshop last week, which is your current plus your 27.9 per annum. And then you've got the original, which Councillor Filippino is putting back into a possible resolution, which is the original spend. Now, for each of those options, if you just put aside the titles for a minute, because I don't want that to be complicating for people, if you look at those options in particular, as we went through at the workshop on Thursday, the difference between the new workshop option and what Councillor Filipaino is putting on the table, if you really focus on those first three outcome areas, those first three outcome areas, which are kauri dieback, our work on our parks and our pest-free program, amount to, in all cases, more than 80% of the spend. So they are the big ticket items. So they're the ones to really focus on in terms of what investment option you want to put forward to Aucklanders. So the difference in those three areas, so the I'll call it the expanded option, and that refers to the motion that Councillor Filipaino has put forward. For the expanded option, we can commit to a reduction in kauri dieback spread by in the order to 10 to 20%. The workshop option gives us a significant reduction. We still get to a low risk of kauri dieback spread, but the sorry, am I like reverberating over the council
chamber?
chamber?
Pull it towards yourself, Gail, and then you don't need to lead forward.
Oh, is that better?
Yep. Yeah. All good.
I feel like I'm hunched over.
The hearing aids.
Okay. So we still get a significant reduction in the kauri dieback through the workshop option, but as I explained last week, what we'll have to do to get close to that reduction in risk is keep a large number of the tracks closed for longer. If you move on to our pest-free program, with the expanded investment, we're able to support 900 community groups with a moderate level of support, and as a result, 60% of Auckland will be under community pest control. In comparison, the workshop option has 600 community groups and about 50% of Auckland. Probably the biggest difference is in the next area, which is in the expanded option before you now. We can commit to Auckland, and this is our estate, the regional and the community parks that we're responsible for. We can commit to having best practice weed and pest animal control in the significant ecological areas across all of our estate. In comparison, the workshop option, we can only commit to about 2/3 of those significant ecological areas being under best practice. The other differences between the options are reasonably significant, but remember they're lower spend. So with the new option on the table, we can commit to 100% of our rural possums being controlled, whereas the workshop option we can commit to 50%. And then the other final difference is if you look down to the Hauraki Gulf pest movement, under the expanded option before you now, we can commit to moth plant and other pest plants being controlled from spread around the Hauraki Gulf. And whereas the workshop option, we can't make that commitment because there won't be any funds. What we did to derive the workshop option is we looked through the program and made decisions on, given the biosecurity priorities, what would be the best things to cut back to meet that workshop investment proposal. So this is the result of that work, the original investment and then the workshop. The final important point to make with respect to the workshop option is the workshop option no longer describes the work programs in the regional pest management plan. So it's a reduction of what was included in the regional pest management plan. In the Regional Pest Management Plan, we had to have that endorsed by the Environment Committee a couple of months ago to meet our statutory requirements under the Biosecurity Act. So if we go ahead with something in the public consultation that doesn't reflect the Regional Pest Management Plan, it's going to create some legal challenges, and we've got the legal team here with us this afternoon to help out if you want to know more about those legal challenges. Thank you. you.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Is it appropriate for me to ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Yep, you're on to it.
Okay, and that goes to the information that is accompanying these options. Are you going to be covering off the dire state as reflected in the State of the Environment report for the region, the State of the Environment report for the Hauraki Gulf, impact of climate change, the background information around the decline in funding around Enviro schools, Make a Difference, Y-Care, land care programs, so that there's a context? And also, are you going to be covering off the value of ecosystem services so that people can quantify the impact of this expenditure relative to the value of the asset, and also
Probably quite a few questions.
and also the merit of leveraged funding. So 3 things that would be useful to have in the context. Are you covering them off in the information being supplied?
Yeah, in answer to your first question, we can include the implications of the spend in those programs in the supporting materials for the consultation. In answer to your second question, which is a really good one, what we've described here for the outcomes are the changes in the natural environment. There'll also be benefits from a financial, cultural and social perspective, and that's the concept of ecosystem services that Councillor Walker has referred to. So at this stage, we're only quantifying the benefits from the natural environment, but there will be flow-on benefits through the services that are provided by the ecosystems that we're healing in terms of financial, cultural and social implications. So that certainly will be the case with these investments. We just haven't quantified those return on investment at this stage. Your third point?
Leveraged funding.
Okay. Dr. Bassett, who's supporting me, has just mentioned that there is some supporting information on ecosystem services in some of the supporting documentation. Your third point about leverage is a key one as well, and certainly with this investment, we'll be in a better position to leverage central government, philanthropic and private sector investment because we'll be seen to be walking the talk.
Good question, Councillor Walker. Right. There is no one else with any questions. Anyone want to comment, or do we just go to the vote? Councillor?
Let's go to the vote.
I just want to remind everybody about the first question asked the Mayor this morning, which was why he changed his mayoral proposal from 376 million back to 279. And if I recall his answer, or paraphrase his answer, it was basically that it would put him outside his 2.5% rates increase, and he also didn't think that the public of Auckland would go for it. Well, I have a different opinion. I think that the environment and water are right up there at the moment. And I think the public of Auckland should be given a chance to look at the bigger picture, as explained by Gail, and I'm sure we'll have the right words in the consultation document. So this is a choice. This is about saying, do you want the middle road, or do you want to go for what the staff, even what the staff asked for isn't, it doesn't go the full hog. We've got all that thrashed out of the workshop. So I think the Mayor in this case is wrong, and I think we should go to consultation, so I'm supporting the amendment.
I'll apologise firstly, because it was me who went to the Mayor and said, do you realise that this higher one actually works against your 2.5? So it was after discussion of that and my suggestion. Yes, I know, but I was just trying to be consistent, so we didn't then get into the argument of how big is the rates rise, 1.4, 2.5, 3, 6,
It's not that we should be
whatever.
making decisions
So
about the environment based on a rates rise.
I'm assisting the Mayor there by taking it on the chin.
That's very kind, Mr. Chairman. Do I have the call? Yeah. Look, I understand the arguments for the third option. In a perfect world, I'd vote for the third option. But we don't live in a perfect world, and everybody around this table knows that. We live in a world where we have much greater demand for really good spending than we have resources to support it. And, yeah, look, it might be tactical. If you give people 3 choices, the chances are people will go for the middle choice, and we'll end up with the 279. But I think that's probably a bit disingenuous for me to want to support. When I look at what we might have done in our 10-year budget, I think of the sporting and the cultural activities that we could have put more money into. I think of climate change, which Councillor Walker raised this morning. I think of urban regeneration, where we're not doing a fraction of what we'd like to do. I think of things like homelessness. So we could go for the perfect solution, or the closest to perfect solution, that our environmental people would want. And I'm not knocking their arguments for it. Their arguments are set out. But this is a zero-sum game. If we spend $77, $80 million more in this area, it's 80 million less that we have to spend in some of the other priority areas. And I'm just saying to you, I think that, what we're going from 9 million to potentially 279 million, that is a massive increase. Warranted? Yes. Will it be wasted? No. Will it produce good results? Yes. But what else is this at the expense of? And each one of you around the table and local board initiatives, etc., will have a series of things that you'd love to do. And I've put a hell of a big part in my proposal into the environment. The water quality, massive increase in expenditure there. And on the options that we did have up there, including the 279 million, a huge increase into enhanced environmental protection. But I am aware that there are other areas that we have undervalued, that we're not spending where we'd want to spend, and if you're going to spend another 80 million here, it will inevitably be at the expense of 80 million somewhere else, unless you just want to add that to the rates burden, which is a choice you can make, but a choice at a certain point you've got to say, I think the public will go with us to spend more money in these areas that are warranted, but let's not be the straw that broke the camel's back. Let's not get a backlash against what's being proposed. Let's settle for a happy medium, and rather than acting tactically, I'd rather go for the medium than putting up the higher amount, which may or may not get through in public consultation.
I noticed the homelessness got to you, Councillor Casey. Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand exactly what the Mayor's saying and agree with 90% of what he said. And this is the difficulty of starting from a position of what a very conservative rates rise is going to be. Ideally, we would have started from a position of what does it take to run this city for the next 10 years? How do we actually take all the challenges of growth, all the complexities of climate change, the environment, our huge social need, the fact that we've grown by a city the size of Tauranga, what does it take to actually run this city? And then go out with a series of options to our community. We've kind of started the other way around, setting ourselves a 2.5% rates increase. That's the reality. And, I respect that. But I think, in a way, Mr. Mayor, I think what we're trying to do is give you a little bit of air cover with this. It is not your fault if we go out and if your councillors vote to have a discussion with our ratepayers out of the 2.5% envelope. And I'd be really disappointed if the media gets stuck into you about that, because the councillors as well have a voice, have a say, and have rights in this debate. And it's unfair that you take the full burden of this. I'm happy to share that. I've got pretty broad shoulders. But somewhere we do need to be having this discussion about what moving outside that boundary means. And I think given the discussion over the last few weeks around the environment, this is a fine place in which to have that discussion with Aucklanders. I actually trust Aucklanders that they don't, I don't know what the straw is that's going to break the camel's back, but I don't know if this is the one. I think a big discussion about what we need for the next 10 years is critical for all of those areas that are vital to us. When we come back and do the real budget, once we've heard from Aucklanders and we get back around the table with the figures and the real debate about what is in and what is out, that's where I think we can have that rational discussion about how do we deal with growth, how do we deal with our community facilities, our sports field, dealing with homeless, all of those really difficult issues. And maybe that's when we say, well, let's, take out a couple of roundabouts, a great big slug of roading and something else. And that's where we trade off area for area, not within the various parts of this budget. So I'm very comfortable going out with a slightly bigger increase to the environment. I certainly, if anyone's read my Facebook feed over the last 3 or 4 days, I'm personally responsible for destroying the Kāori single-handedly. So I realise that there's a lot of strong feeling out there. However, that's not what's driving my support for Councillor Filipaina's recommendation. I think this is the biggest challenge we've got. And I'll finish by saying I want to thank the Mayor most warmly and with a huge deal of respect for actually putting in this budget, finally, some decent narrative and some decent thought for the environment. It's been lacking for the last 6 years and it's finally there. But I don't apologise for pushing the envelope just a little bit further. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
I'm really pleased to see that the people from the last item have taken up my idea of offering choice. It's wonderful how quickly my comments have worked. So I support this because of about giving choice, and I think we need to give a wider choice. We need to let people know the initial discussion we were having, the 3 options we were given by our staff at the beginning, but at the same time I actually support the middle option. But I do think people should be offered a choice. So it's simple for me. I'm going to be consistent, but some things. I know some people want to give choice for some things and not for others, but I'm not going to decide, you know, in this case, for people. I'll let them have the choice. So I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hills.
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly, I think this one is about choice, but it's a very easy, simple. The work's been done. We've got the information there on all of these options, and it's very clear what people will be paying for and getting from these 3 choices. I think the other thing is this was the original top figure, I guess, which has a few 100% in there. So it's sort of setting a benchmark. And I think for me, it's less about the money on this one. It's about the outcome. So people have to sit there and consult on what is their preferred outcome for the environment and for the option. So it's not against the mayor or anything to have the original proposal to have those 3 in there, but I think it will be good to come back, or people might ask, why is your number 2 only offering the 80% and the 80%? So it doesn't, you know, I think the middle option is a massive increase. I mean, you're going from 3 to 5 million over 10 years for Cody Dye back to 100 million over 10 years, which is just, you know, huge. But the top option's 113. But you do have things in here like 100% of significant ecological sites covered and 100% of rural Auckland with adequate control. We're not saying that we'll support that top option, but I think it's important to have the 3 out there, you know, to consult on. And because all the information has been done and it's sitting here in our agenda with the options, because that was the original figure, I think it's right to leave it in. So I think we'll come back and have a clear percentage. It's a very easy one to have a percentage of support, or do not there. So I support the amendment on this one.
Councillor Fletcher.
Well, I think it's been said by a number of colleagues, but I, for one, want the public to have choice and to understand what best practice will take in Auckland and the costs associated with it. So I think they're entitled to that information, and I will be supporting the amendment.
Right.
By division.
By division. I'm going to just comment as well, which is, I suppose, yes, I did come up with what I thought was a practical option. It was also just to correct a little anomaly where it slipped through that went away from the mayoral intent of 2.5. And I don't apologise for that, but probably what worries me most, and because I'm actually supportive of 279, you know, not that I've made up my mind, because I'm going to keep an open mind, etc. When it comes back next year, and I'm probably fairly supportive of the water targeted rate as well. What worries me is there's a whole lot of things that we're not really going out and saying a lot about, and the thing of most concern to me is the Panuku program. I mean, the Panuku program to me is, and this is related, is so vital. And I know what we've done out west with placemaking. That's the only way we're going to get some step changes is to be putting a lot of money into these town centres, which many of them are tired. And Councillor Newman was talking about some that are not even on the support category. They're just out there, the next thing. And if it wasn't for the Ollies, the one local board initiative coming through to make some improvements, you'd be getting nothing happening other than what the local board does with spending 50 here and 100 there and tarting things up a bit. So, but we're actually not going out there talking about that was with an option A and an option B and an option C or whatever, when for many that is just so crucial for us in relation to impairing the waterfront or America's Cup, etc. So I'm not going to support this. Whoops, I didn't mean it to go, but back. I won't be supporting this, but I'm certainly hoping that we come back with very good feedback on whichever it is, 279 or 356. I'm quite relaxed on that. So we have Councillor Simpson.
Sorry, just quickly, Mr. Chairman, if we don't support this amendment and there's the two options as per the Mayor, there is still room for people to say something else. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Because in reality, we are actually, these are additional, so we've got the original, which is the 97 million, and then an additional 123, an additional 279, and an additional 356. So you've either got three to four options. So. Okay, Councillor Philippone.
And I haven't got the last say, I know that, yes. But just a question of clarification. So if there's only two options that go out, if people wish to end up enhancing some of the percentages if the number 3 goes out, that won't happen. Can I get that confirmed? It won't happen because we'll only have the two options. If they wish to do more, it won't happen.
So if the community comes back and says that they want to spend more,
yes,
then you will have the option to make a decision to do that after considering their views.
There we go.
Exactly. That's so.
So you would be able to make that decision, and that will be within the scope.
Right. Oh, okay. And just a supplementary question then, Andrew. Supplementary question being that if there's only two options, what we will get from the third that I have put up, will that go out in the consultation document? I'm assuming that it's going to be no, but you can answer that.
Wouldn't be in the consultation document,
Thank
but
you.
all the issues with the 356 million are on the public agenda today.
I understand that, but I'm just saying it won't go out specifically with the consultation document. Thank you. Thank you.
Are you wanting to finalise the debate, or you're happy?
No, there's none with the. Oh, it's an inclusion,
Sayers.
but no, I'm fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just like to understand if we put this out as another option, another 77 million. At a rough calculation, at 15 million per 1% rate increase, we're talking about 5.1% equivalent in rates adjustments there. So I'm just curious, if this is successful as an option, what gets dropped, or do we take it out of borrowings? How does council think about how it balances its budget around that?
All we're doing is consulting at the moment. We're not actually getting down to cutting up the cake, but effectively this is an extra 0.5%. Okay.
Yep. So if you go,
it would take on the formula at the back of the Merrill proposal on page 16. It would take it from 1.4 is the lower option of 123, 2.5 is 279, and 3% is 356. So it's a 0.5%.
It's set out in this paper here that was circulated to you this morning. Okay. So it's on the bundle on your desk. That shows all three options.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay. By division.
Councillor Clow.
No.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
No.
Councillor Cooper.
Aye.
Councillor Darby.
Against.
Councillor Philippine.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes.
Mayor Goff.
No.
Councillor Hills,
Yes.
Member Honeck, Councillor Hulse,
Aye.
Councillor Lee,
Aye.
Councillor Newman. Aye. Councillor Quacks,
No.
Councillor Sayers,
No.
Councillor Simpson, Councillor Stewart,
No.
Member Taipari,
No.
Councillor Sir John Walker,
No.
Councillor Wayne Walker,
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
Okay, so that's been, let's get this right, lost 12-9. Thank you. Right, we're now moving to the last amendment that I've had foreshadowed, and Councillor Filipaina, are you still pushing to put your...
I think 3 out of 3 it might be a no, but I'm going to give it a crack anyway.
So we just need to check. Have
Yeah,
you got- have
I
you got
just need a seconder.
Yeah.
Just need a seconder. Yeah, I can
So
see
we're-
that.
We're just putting this up here, so we need a seconder for this debate to continue.
All good. But there's none.
Okay, I've had a pregnant pause there, but I think that's enough. There is no seconder, so it lapses. Right, so we are now going back to the substantive, and the substantive is what was on the screen this morning with the one change from the program. Sorry, from the printed edition and the edition on the hub, so which is F2. So we have general debate, but I'm going to ask the Mayor whether he wants to lead in first to discuss.
No, I'll reserve my right to speak at the end if need be.
Questions? Questions?
Your Worship, number A.
It's going to be a long day. Starting with A.
Starting at the very beginning.
I want to talk about F again.
Did you want to add any words around that saying, and the removal of the ITL?
No, because what I have, if you look at the comments over leaf that will go out in the consultation process, my determination is not to prolong the ITL for all the reasons that I've said many times, but I have put a proviso in. If something came up and the government said, we can't get this through in 2018, we would not be able to wait beyond later in 2018 without the risk of leaving a huge hole in the fiscal envelope for transport. So I want to drop the interim transport levy, but it is on the basis that the government will have this done and dusted by the latter half of 2018.
Thank you. I promise never to ask you that question again.
Councillor Darby.
Look, just a little tidy up there. The activities doesn't suggest non-transport activities. I'm just wondering if that is really transport projects and programs. The way it's written at the moment, I mean, I know it means transport, but it is entirely hypothecated, and that's the intention, isn't it?
Yep, it is entirely hypothecated, largely for CapEx, but also maybe some OpEx, which then gives us the ability to leverage off that revenue in terms of borrowing.
Okay, so just in the explanatory that needs to be supported, at the moment it doesn't quite look like that, but we understand it, but others may not. But
So would the introduction of the word solely to fund help?
I think solely to fund transport projects and programs, or I'll take some guidance from Matthew, actually.
But the point you're making is only for transport stuff, isn't it?
Solely's fine.
Solely would do it. It means the same as hypothecate, but
Yeah, you don't
you
wanna
know,
use that.
outside of this room, I'm not sure how many people know what hypothecate means. You don't want to add anything to that?
Possibly asking a question here, but through the chair, the other word you could use is services. So it would be there on solely, and perhaps it's
transport infrastructure,
transport
and
projects
services.
and services.
Rather than activities, services. I'd be happy to.
Transport, infrastructure and services.
Yep.
And we would take
Solely fund?
Just look at that.
Any other queries about
Good question.
B?
No, I'm
So we're talking about questions relating to any of these on the screen. And Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks. It's just the accommodation rates. No. And to you, Andrew, that is concerning those people who own accommodation businesses in Area C. They will still be paying the business rate.
That's correct.
Councillor Flippin.
In regards to B, Andrew and Ross, I know that in just a question around 2015 to 2025 long-term plan, can you just confirm what the percentage, as in rate rise, was in 17, 18, 18, 19 and 19, 20, please?
So it was, so in 17, 18, 2.5%, and the proposal...
No, that's a 2015 to...
15.
Yeah, 15 to 2025. If I said to you that it was 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, would I be wrong?
The plan, in terms of plan in the last long-term plan, but those are the correct numbers.
Yeah, no. So there was 3.5, 3.5, 3.5?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and last year through the annual plan was 2.5?
Yes.
And then you've got the subsequent 18, 19, 19, 20, 2.5, 2.5?
As proposed.
Yes, as proposed. Can I then assume that there'll be $45 million shortfall as a result? From 15 to 25, there'll be $45 million shortfall?
So
if the proposed rate 2.5 is put out for consultation and comes back, and it confirmed at 2.5, can I confirm that it's $45 million shortfall based on 15 to 25?
So compared to the last long-term plan was 3.5%,
Yes.
3.5%.
Yes.
If you were to follow through and set the rates at 2.5% each of those years, that's 1% less each year.
Yes.
That equates to about 15 million each year.
Yes, that's about
So
45.
15 million for year one, then it becomes 30 million per annum, and then
Yes,
45
and then
million.
45.
So compared to the two, in terms of a shortfall is...
Yep, it's 45. And will that be 45 million in subsequent years? Loop around giving a choice for the community and everything else. So, no, look, I just wanted to confirm that there's a 45 million. We won't catch up on it. Thank you. That's for our community.
Ross?
Thank you.
Hang on.
Yeah, I've got to answer it this way, Alf. Can you confirm that if we are missing out on 1%, which is equal to 15 million, once we've got the regional fuel tax, we'll be adding up to 150 million, which is not 45 million over 3 years, but 450 million. So actually our revenue is much expanded.
And can we get can I? Well, no, I'm just looking at supplementary questions as well.
Let this one get answered and then we'll give you a supplementary.
Well, it is question time. So the supplementary is that did we have an interim transport levy in place over the last few years?
Okay, so we've got two questions to answer.
I'm just sort of...
Yes, we did.
Yeah, thank you.
Let the other people have lots of questions.
And my supplementary is that interim transport levy over 3 years is 180, and we're still comparing that with 450 million from the regional fuel tax, aren't we?
So,
Wait a minute. Now, Ross has got three questions.
Yes.
Three questions to answer.
I think it's yes, those are all...
All correct. Yes.
We're both right, Alf.
Well done, Ross.
Advance on 60 million.
Next.
well, I know. I've got a few more if you wish. Yeah?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Questions.
I'll carry on with it. So, do we know what our community will be missing out on as a result of the monies that is going out from the 15 to 25 long-term plan? Do we know what our community will be missing out on?
No, we don't. That would be a decision. If you had the extra money, you would decide what to spend it on. So we can't, as staff, can't say what would not be, what would not be spent on.
And will the local boards, if they were consulted, they would know what their community will be missing out on as a result of 2.5? I'm just sort of asking supplementaries, Your Worship.
I understand, absolutely.
Thank you very much. I'm assuming...
They understand.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
A question on process to you, sir. Just wanting to know that you're willing to undertake each of these individually as you have in previous debates.
Yep, I will. I'm not going to do F1 and F2 individually. F will be together. But I'll certainly do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H.
Thank you.
Right. So we're going to put preface. Oops, we've got hands shooting up. Councillor Casey.
I just want to say a thank you to the Mayor for the commitment to funding homeless initiatives. It's really gratifying to see not only the annual funding of 500,000 for this term, but also his acknowledgement that Housing First is working and working really well, and also his commitment to establishing a good working relationship with government, which should see that magnified, not just here in Auckland, but right across the region and right across the country, hopefully. So it's fantastic. Thank you.
Great initiative by the previous government, wasn't it?
Councillor Lee.
Yes. It's sort of like questions you always wanted to ask. In terms of the 300 million diversified fund assets, I think I'd better put that in writing about where that money has gone. But I've got a couple of other questions. In terms of the, and because it's ongoing, it's relevant, in terms of the accommodation targeted rate and the income or the revenue received from that, do we have an accounting of how much have we got, and will it be ring-fenced to be spent on transport infrastructure or whatever infrastructure?
So the accommodation provided targeted rate is to fund the visitor attraction and major events activities undertaken by ATEED. It's budgeted to fund 50% of that, and any money collected will be used for that purpose.
Hang on, that's only half the story. ATEED's budget was to be reduced commensurately so that there would be some money, 13, 15, it started off at 26 million, I think, whatever it was then to go to transport infrastructure or just infrastructure?
Because the accommodation provider targeted rate is now funding those ATEED activities, the general rates that was going to fund that is now freed up, and that general rate can instead be available for transport expenditure.
It could be available, but it was committed that it would be available. So
it's available, was planned to be spent that way.
I'm not satisfied with that. Now, second question is, I think it was very early in July, just as the last annual plan closed, we had a very spur of the moment short notice request from AT, up to 204 million for battery trains, which I thought rather unwisely the governing body approved. That was turned down by AT. So what are the budgetary implications for those decisions? First, to approve 204, up to 204 million, and then NZTA saying, no, that's silly, which it is in my view. We will approve the acquisition of EMUs. What is the net result of all that when it comes to transport?
There's a report coming to the next Finance and Performance Committee tomorrow, I understand, that has that item on the agenda. So that's where you'll see all the information on that.
All will be revealed. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Newman, Councillor Watson and Councillor Sayers.
Questions. I'm comment on the fuel charge.
Yeah, no, we're commenting now, but the odd question pops up.
If there are questions, I'm happy.
Are there any other questions? So we're quite clear. Okay, last question is Councillor Hills.
So my question is around the transport funding. So there's been a couple comments today around should we make savings instead of having another fund, or what happened to the the budget implications. So where's this extra money? But there's a $6 billion gap, right? So if we do make any savings, everything just moves into that gap, but we still have more to fund. It's not like we magically have more money. It's just closing the gap slowly with these extra funding things. Am I correct? Is that
Yes, any extra funding that you can find, be it from savings or new revenue source, helps to close that gap. And yes, there is still a large multi-billion-dollar transport funding gap based off the existing ATAP. The size of the gap may change as you work through a new funding gap with government over the next few months. But it's a large gap.
Even with the huge pressure we're putting on with things like $300 million 17A reviews and different things like that, we're still looking at a really large gap despite savings and the extra revenue from petrol tax.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, right. There are no more questions, definitely. Councillor Newman.
Chair, thank you. I remain deeply sceptical about the effectiveness and the equity of the proposed regional fuel tax. I've stated before, and I will restate my acknowledgement of the Mayor's campaign pledge on this matter. I acknowledge that the Labour Party campaigned on a promise to introduce legislation that allowed for the fuel tax for the Auckland region. Chair, my constituents, some of the most deprived communities in Auckland, will be at the top end of the rate increase, taking into account the impact of revaluations. Manurewa, Papakura, Mangere, Otahu, Papatoetoe and Otara. We this time, because of the timing of the revaluation, do, I think, the disproportionate heavy lifting in terms of the rate increase. Now, Chair, I've listened since I got here to this council to some of the speeches around this table which extol the arrival of mode share, transformational mode share, where people abandon the car in favour of public transport. Well, Chair, the inconvenient truth on that is that when you have a look at the data from the last 3 censuses, it illustrates the change in mode share for private motor vehicles travelling to and from work in Auckland. It has gone from 75.7 down to 74%. But the total number of trips using the private vehicle continues to rise. Now, Chair, in my ward, the total number of people travelling to and from work using a private vehicle is higher than that. It's 85% in Manurewa and 82% in Papakura. So, Chair, I have to say that choice of transport mode is not equitable around this region, and if it were to be rapid and frequent public transport services that allow blue-collar shift workers to leave their cars at home so as to avoid the 11.5 cents per litre fuel tax, it might be a different conversation from me. Now, I wholly accept the Mayor's intention to try and fund the delivery of transport infrastructure, and much of that is weighted in favour of public transport. Well, Chair, the fact is that we have 6,500 kilometres of roading infrastructure in this region, and that is very valuable transport infrastructure, and that is funded for the regions and the nation's motorists. And Auckland Transport are telling me in correspondence that the heavy traffic volumes across the region have been increasing by 3.6% per year. That has resulted in more pavement wear and tear and increased road maintenance across this region. Now, Auckland Transport's road maintenance expenditure has generally increased, and the New Zealand Transport Agency's funding has generally increased with the growth in road maintenance. However, and this is going to be the challenge for forthcoming negotiation that the Mayor will have to lead with the Crown, in most work categories there is a cap on the New Zealand Transport Agency's funding, which results in a portion of the expenditure being fully funded by this council. Now, the Mayor has clarified for his proposal to introduce a fuel tax, which is mandated by the government, This is to be offset by the abolition of the interim transport levy. And the Mayor has clarified, and I acknowledge this, that revenue from the fuel tax will be hypothecated for the purpose of advancing the ATAP. Chair, part of the revenue that is being taken at the moment from the interim transport levy is helping to fund OPEX and renewals. That is a fact. And I'm deeply concerned about a proposal that means that some of the people, some of the poorest ratepayers who have the least transport choice in the outer suburbs, who are going to have to pay that fuel tax, who have the least option, they are going to be the ones that do the heavy lifting, and actually the return from that doesn't really come back to the outer suburbs. And the Mayor has foreshadowed that this will be addressed, hopefully, through the forthcoming GPS and the negotiation with the government. I think the experience to date leaves me pessimistic about the willingness of NZTA 1 to properly fund the renewal and the operating cost share that the government needs to fund, and 2, its willingness to fund significant roading projects like Mill Road. So I'm concerned, Chair, about where we are going on that. I'd say this, Chair, Auckland Transport advises me, and they didn't really need to advise me on this, I kind of already knew this for myself, that the heavy traffic volumes that have increased throughout this region, particularly trucks travelling from Drury and Hunua and Clevedon and Brookby, which carry 80% of the aggregate for Auckland's roads, they are absolutely destroying those subgrade roads in my ward, particularly in Takanini. The subgrade structure for those roads is very, very weak indeed. And I'm concerned that we are, at this stage, looking to knock out the interim transport levy, which has a component which has been supporting the renewals and the OPEX programs for Auckland Transport, and replacing it with a hypothecated fuel levy to fund the ATAP program, because to me there's still a lot of work to do in the renewal and maintenance program. My final point, Chair, I just want to comment on the liability of these words from Speech from the Throne. This government will remove the Auckland urban growth boundary and free up density controls, end quote. And I say that because there are consequences for our transport program that are totally unfunded. They are not comprehended, in my view, by people who are supporting that statement. Because I can tell you, removing the urban growth boundary in my ward means a bridge from Weymouth to Karaka, and that's $1 billion, unfunded. Removing the urban growth boundary means we'll have to look at Takanini and Alfriston. Well, that's Mill Road. That's at the moment. That's not a guarantee, but that's another $1 billion, and the list goes on. So I don't support some of the planning changes that I am hearing are going to be foreshadowed for Auckland, and I'm concerned about the fact that we don't have the funding mechanism in place, in my view, switching from the interim transport levy to a hypothecated fuel tax to address the day-to-day costs that I see coming down the pipe that Auckland Transport and the New Zealand Transport Agency has to fund, but which seem to be strained and squeezed because of the preference for bright and shiny and new, when there's 6,500 kilometres worth of existing transport infrastructure that needs to be considered too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. So I gave Councillor Newman 8.5 minutes there, so all up to everyone how you want to deal with it. I'm being quite flexible here. Councillor Watson, Sayers, Simpson and Cashmore.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll try and half that amount then. First of all, I'd like to start off by commending the Mayor. He made a real effort to try and come to a balance in this proposal, and it's certainly not easy trying to strike a right balance between getting income from the limited range of sources available, not pushing people too far who really can't afford it, and not alienating the rest who maybe can afford it but who've had a guts full of paying high rate increases. So I think there's been a really honest effort to try and balance those at times disparate elements. Having said that, I think Councillor Newman made some good points nonetheless, and I for one am going to be really interested to listen to what people have got to say, because with the regional fuel tax, which, when it's all said and done, is really going to be the only mechanism open to us where we can get some reasonable sum of money to advance these transport projects, there are going to be a lot of different circumstances there. If you just look at the price of petrol in the last couple of years, it's gone from about $1.71 or so at one point up to nearly $2.30. That's a huge range. That's nearly 50 cents a litre. 11.5 cents on $1.77 or something is not quite so significant as when it's up at 2.20s or 2.30s. So there is a bit of a way to go here, particularly in people's usage. I know the AA said that it was going to possibly come in an average of about $130 a year, but that really presupposes about people using one tank every fortnight. Now, I know there's people that use, quite a bit more on that, and they're just ordinary sort of families that do a lot of driving around. That's my time up, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, that's it. It's your inflammatory remarks, Tom.
Oh, geez.
I've had too many.
They know we're here today.
Someone said so.
Okay.
Okay.
We have to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, to save time, I can keep speaking while you guys...
I'll stay and listen to it.